Hello, all, and welcome to the Fantasy and Sci-Fi Fanatics podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Coolbaugh. Today, having a very special guest, Ryan Lance. Ryan, how are you doing today?
Great, great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, of course, of
Yeah,
course.
I'm doing great.
Always cool. Oh, go ahead.
No, I'm just doing great. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, awesome. Sorry, there was like a weird delay there. My internet's been weird here today. But yeah, thanks for coming on. It's always fun for me when I can just find somebody like I was saying before we recorded organically, and then be like, hey, I have this spot at this date, you mind coming on? So I was scrolling through Facebook and I saw your cover and I was just like, yep, I'm a history teacher, so the cover in particular really drew me in. I love that type of fantasy, so I was like, yeah, this has to happen. So I'm so glad
So
that
yeah,
I
I'm
can get you on. So
oh thanks. Yeah, I feel very lucky to have gotten that cover. Like it was I found the right artist, right time who had like the skills and yeah, it's
yeah,
like, yeah, everybody so frets so much about getting their cover done.
yeah,
And for it to pop off first time, like basically like no feedback, just trust the artist to make something that they like, and it was great.
yeah. No, it looks totally awesome. It's definitely
Yeah.
my kind of. Ooh, I don't know why we have a feedback. I'm so sorry. I'm too bad. I'm trying to see if that works. Sorry about that. I was gonna say it definitely is my type of like fantasy cover. Uh yeah, like everything about it, just even like the hues to me with the colors just seem totally right. So to me, and when I
Oh
was
yeah.
reading your blurb, I was like, that's just perfect. So
Yeah, he's a great guy, John Molinaro. Like I found him on ArtStation, and he's still down to do book covers. I think
oh
was really happy to hear all the good feedback coming from it. I don't have any reviews yet on my book on Amazon, but like coming to me about the cover, everybody's like,
yeah,
"That's
yeah,
the
yeah.
cover," Yeah, so I think you should be really like proud of it. Like I'm really thankful for it.
Yeah. Well, I'll definitely be talking to him at some point because I have my Kindle Vella series I want to put into an anthology, and then do a cover from there. And just the style alone and the hues and just everything, I was like, oh, I just love that. I'm like, that's like I could totally see your story being in my type of world and setting, and just I feel like it captured all the feels basically of what I'm trying to convey as an author. So I thought that was just really, really cool. So yeah, that was definitely a great
Cool,
idea
cool, cool.
and great collaboration on both of your parts. So that's awesome. But we're gonna get to you and your writing though. Speaking of, your book. So what has your writing journey been like up until this point?
So this is my fifth book. I've had two
Cool.
novels and two novellas that I've written before. And I've also had like some other long projects that I abandoned along the way for different reasons, where novels that got half finished and then I, kind of turned my back on them after a while. But so it was like a hard process, like quite a few years ago, I really wanted to be traditionally published. That was what,
Mm.
I wanted. I had that image of what it was going to be like. And, that classic case of, like my skills weren't good enough, you know what I mean? But so, it's like I think it's very tough on the heart to write all of that stuff and then to realize like, man, I'm just practicing. But
Yeah.
this book, this book is the first one where I feel pretty good about like the prose and the plot. Like I think the prose and the plot are good enough to where like I did query it. I did try to find
Mm.
traditional representation for it, and that didn't work out. And I was like, you know what? It's a weird book, but like I think it's good enough. So, and I got that. I always held on to that I was going to do that at some point if I couldn't find an agent because
Yeah.
right, we're all fantasy writers. We all know Brandon Sanderson. He has a bit where he talked about trying to traditionally publish just for the reason to get good. And I saw him talking about that when I was working on my first book. He said that like, he's like some people are just born great and like their first book comes out great. Everyone loves it first time they get published and it's fine. But he said what you don't know about yourself is you can't really tell what your own skill level is. You can't really assess your own work for its quality. And so
Yeah.
he said that, like you should wait until, I don't know what he said, third or fourth or fifth book or something like that. He said, like, wait until you've written that many, and then your ability to self-assess will be good enough to where you could decide to self-publish. And so I kind of took that to heart. It was like, like I think I want to know for myself before I try it. And I did. And like this book, like it was a hard one to write too, because I started writing it during the things that were going on over the last few years.
Oh yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I had to move a couple of times. And so, fortunately, I was able to stick with it. So it took a couple of years longer than I wanted to. It took 2.5 years, something like that. But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it got done. So, and I'm happy with it. So like, I feel good about it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I do agree with you though, like like books two, yeah, like 3 to 5, like I have had a lot of people on and I've noticed that once people really get to that third book, particularly for indie publishing, where they've written and published their third book and gone through the whole process. That fourth book to me is always really exciting. Or if they start another trilogy or a series or whatever. I actually have, like you, I don't know. I think I have 6 books that I could probably finish up this summer. Like take my pick. I'm like pretty close, and they have to be edited and stuff, but they're there. Like the skeletons there. Um, so yeah, I'm on my first novella. Will probably be, I think, my fourth or fifth book. I don't know where I've like finished. So yeah, I definitely understand that because I was like, well, I don't want to publish my first book because I was so worried that it really wasn't going to be to a specific spot. So because I also listened to Brandon a lot. It's funny, real quick, that I actually met Brandon Sanderson right when Way of Kings came out, and it was
Oh,
funny.
really?
And
Oh, it's
Patrick Rothfuss was there too in the Name of the Wind, and they're like over to the side. Kevin Hearn was the big person for Iron Druid Chronicles. And he brought all these indie and then the 2 traditional published authors. Michael J. Sullivan was there, he was a character. But I it was funny because I feel like I knew who Brandon was, but I hadn't read any of his stuff yet. And some of my friends had, but not really. So I kind of met him and Patrick before, and actually Pierce Brown too. Red Rising had just came out. So it's so funny to years later, see where kind of people get and stuff, both in
yeah,
the
yeah,
indie and traditionally published. But yeah, it was interesting. Brandon, I was like, what are you gonna do next? He goes, I'm just gonna pump out another book. So, and a couple of people asked him that. He's like, I'm just gonna keep writing. So that my mantra from day one. People ask me all the time, what happens if people don't like this? I'm like, I'll write another one. I'll write another one,
right.
like somebody will like it eventually. And that's what, Brandon says in his lectures too for BYU. So I think that's interesting. But
And
yeah, that's
I
funny.
think there's a lot of people that kind of brute force their way through by just loving writing and doing it. There's somebody.
Yeah.
So are you familiar with the YouTube channel Film Courage?
Yeah,
Have
yeah,
you
yeah,
ever
yeah.
watched that? Yeah, I
Just
love
a
Film
couple,
Courage.
a couple.
I used to watch them all the time. I still do sometimes. They had a guy on who was talking about like his mantra was be inevitable, and he was like
I
I think he
like
said he
that.
wrote like 20, he's like I wrote like 20 features. Like I just
Oh
kept
wow.
going until like something stuck. It's like yeah,
Yeah.
like yeah,
Well,
you're trying to find that thing.
people forget George R. R. Martin, right? Like he was late in his career when he wrote Game of Thrones. I think people forget that. And Adrian Tchaikovsky, right? Children of Time. Like I remember listening to him on Wizards, Warriors, and Words, and he was like, I gave myself after 15 years of writing, I gave myself one more year. And he's like, if I didn't make it, I was gonna go get like a real job and stop doing it full time. And then that's when he wrote Children of Time. And look at him now, so I agree with you. It's just interesting, right? I like that quote though. That's
Yeah.
probably kind of my mantra now. I'm gonna steal that from you and him. But I
Yeah,
like that.
I took it from Film Courage, so it's free
Yeah,
game.
yeah, yeah. Now I'm gonna have to go back and check those out again. Somebody said that a while back to me. I think it was Nicholas LaRue or somebody, because I was interviewing some people for different mediums and stuff. Audio. Some people were doing like audio stories, stuff like that, particularly on Spotify. But yeah, I watched a couple. I'm about to go back to that because that's a really good quote. Don't want to miss out on good kernels like that.
Yeah, right.
Um, but yeah, it's awesome that you talked about like having a lot of obstacles, and I mean, I'm right there with you. Since the pandemic, I feel like it's been one thing after another. So some days I tell people I'm like, I finished my novella. They're like, I'm like, now it's time to edit, and they're like, oh, that's cool, and then they go back and route their
Right.
day. But I'm like, no, you don't
Yeah. For
understand,
you, it's
like
like, yeah,
you know, yeah, and it's unless you're in the community, that's why I do the podcast
right,
because not even really about, no offense, audience. It's not about you guys. It's about me trying to learn from people like you, but also to keep me going, like to
right.
see your successes, and be like, that's possible for me, and to try and help people, further along. Because I feel like
Yeah.
the way we move forward in the indie community in particular. That's what I've seen in 10 years at least. So, but
It,
yeah.
it would be too brutally lonely to not try to engage in like some
Oh,
community stuff too. Like it would just be no way,
yep.
and the books won't be as good.
Yep.
Like you really lean on people to try to get it done.
Yep. Well, I talk about cultural diffusion a lot because I'm a history teacher. That's all I'm talking about in really all three of my classes, my three grade levels. And it's so funny that you said that because there's so many times where you authors or creators will say something and I'm like, huh, didn't think about that way. Or I'll mention, or you guys talk about something you did, or it doesn't matter if it's the same idea, right? It's just that kernel gets in there. And I always get better. My writing's always better. I said to somebody a while back, I said, the only reason I finished anything the last 2 years, has been because of this podcast, because people keep giving me ideas, or strategies or just support.
That's great.
And to me, it's all the same thing. But no, it's cool. Yeah, that's like what
I tell
that's
you,
so funny that that's like people told me when I met Brandon, all these guys, like Brian McCullen was there and Brandon's protege, and he's like, dude, like, and there were other guys there too, but they're like, this is a cool community to be a part of. They're like, go check this person's book. And I go and I'm like, oh, all three of these people on this side all, said on their each other's covers, right? Like, hey, this was a stunning book, or this was really good, or whatever. And I saw they're like, yeah, we just really come to these things to hang out together, and have a good time and maybe sell some books. And I that to me like really stuck with me. And the indie community ever since then I feel like has grown and just grown stronger, and particularly fantasy and sci-fi, and just became more fun than it was. So I hope we keep it going. So,
yeah. Can I tell
all
you
right.
one other thing about the writing
Yeah,
journey
yeah.
though? It's like I think that was like really helped me. I got this writing guide book a while back called The Idea by Eric Bjork,
Okay.
or Eric Bork. And he gives it's all about coming up with like the right premise for your book so that it's something that's like marketable and something that you'll want to really care about. I couldn't tell
Mhm.
you what his criteria were, but he has like 7 criteria for what makes like a good premise for a book.
Oh,
And
cool.
like how punishing is it for the characters, like how entertaining it does it sound? Is it new and novel? But one of them was is it life changing for you to write? Right. And that was one of the most important criteria to him. And it was something that I used when I was trying to come up with stuff for Torchlight, was I wanted it to
Mm.
be something that would feel more meaningful to me. So like the two books that I abandoned along the way, I or you remember the old Western Fistful of Dollars? It's based on
Yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
samurai films. Yeah, I
Yep.
did I did one. I got about halfway through one novel where I watched all of the movies that were derivative of Fistful of Dollars, right? And then I
Yeah, yeah.
outlined a novel that was based on Fistful of Dollars, but was fantasy, right? And I even like there was like an 80s fantasy movie that was kind of like that. And I was like, this is really cool. I got about halfway through it when my child was born and she was sick for about a week. Like we didn't get her out of the hospital for like almost like a week and a half. And so I'm there
Oh,
like every day, right? In
yeah,
and
yeah.
out of the hospital. And by the end of that, and then you go home and you're stressed out and stuff. And then you look at the stupid book that you don't care about at all. It's like a gimmick. It's like, oh, fistful of dollars in fantasy. I don't care, right? And it's throw it in the trash. Like I'm done with this, right? Because it doesn't mean anything to you. It's just like cute. It's a cute idea. And like a cute idea could hear, if I could be perfect, if I could have written for 6 months straight every day, 4 hours a day or something, just grinded it out and gotten done while the idea was hot, maybe. But if
Yeah.
anything bad happens
Yeah.
along the way, it sucks the life out of it, right? And so, like something that's helped me and with Torchlight, because I had a whole bunch of stuff happen over the last couple of years, and having like the idea of something that I cared about that like
Mm.
would bring me back to the book and make me like read or listen to the whole book again to get back on my footing with it and like motivated enough to like re-put the whole outline back in my head when I'd have to take time away from it. The only reason why I did that was because of the idea. So I think that's like a pretty useful book if you have like any chaos in your life at all.
Oh, yeah, that's a great suggestion. I wrote that one down, so I definitely have to check that out. I do think now when you said seven criteria, I do believe that it's in my notes from a while back, but same thing. I had
Yeah,
a lot of stuff happens. I feel like
sure
I
it's a
got to go
popular
back.
idea.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But yeah, no, that's really good. I do agree with you though that, certain ideas like I had a short story that turned into one of my first fantasy novels, and I don't think I'm quite there yet in order to be able to write it. I got to gain another level. I did recently, I feel like, but I feel like I have to get one more level up to really do it justice but I keep sticking with the idea. My friend goes, you keep going back to this it's going to be good eventually, you know. And I'm like,
Yeah,
but that's the same thing. There are things in it that it's almost like my therapy. Like I had stuff happen to me, and
yeah, you care
you
about
know,
it, and
yeah, you know, I really care about it. I want people to, you know, it's a redemption story and arc, and I want yeah, I want to finish it. You know, I have to finish it. And I've talked to a lot of people that, you know, that story that you have to finish. Kelly McCullough, when I had him on, told me the greatest story because I love his Fallen Blade series. And even more now because he was telling me how he ended up, that was his one that he kept throwing away, right? And that's back when he was, you know, we were physically writing. So he put it in his drawer, though, luckily, because like someone told him. And then he went and then did Webmage, and then wrote a bunch of those. And then that company was like, "Hey, we want an idea." So he's like, "I got this dark fantasy I'm working on." Goes back, changes some things. That became the Fallen Blade. Those books, speaking of a hard time, got me through one of the hardest times in my life. And just
Fallen Blade.
yeah, you know, he just did such a good job, but he cared about the, you know, that story so much that you could just feel it, you know, and the main character had so much talk about trauma, dang, you know, but talk about redemption and seeing him triumph, you know, like helped me triumph in real life, you know, and that's to me what fantasy and sci-fi and just books in general, you know, are really cool. So I agree with you. I think that, you know, you
Yeah,
really need,
100%.
yeah, but like, and I'm not even saying that like you and I have to care about the same thing, you know,
Right. Yeah.
in
Yeah.
those characters, but you know, you have to care enough, you know, to keep reading. You know, I've had a couple recently where I'm like, I don't really care about the main character, you know, like or what
Right.
their struggle is or you know, or whatever. But yeah, I definitely know that feeling. But yeah, I agree with you. I think you really have to, you know, especially to write it, right? You need to be that person that cares about it. But so speaking of like genres, so what genre or genres are you currently writing and why?
So Torchlight, I think I put that up as dark fantasy, sword and sorcery, and fantasy action and adventure. Just like that's kind of how it felt. I can't remember her name right now because she's new to me, but the guest you had on for your last episode.
Oh man, sorry. I'm
That's okay.
so ahead of
No, no.
recording. I have to think about it.
Oh,
Oh wait,
okay.
sorry, HC Newell.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So she had like some great comments about like trying to like know your genre and stuff. Like like she's ahead of me in this game and like pretty smart. So I just co-sign a bunch of stuff she said, but like it fantasy itself, I feel like gives like some of the most freedom to do a
Yeah,
lot
yeah,
of
yeah.
different things, like you can have, a heist or a romance or, like all of these different things and it can still be fantasy. So I feel
Yeah,
like if you don't really know what your book is going to be like, like put some dragons in there and like, oh, we're good to go, like
yeah.
somebody like it. Yeah.
No, it's fair. I have a it was bugging me. I wanted to do something with Romans, soldiers, and the Lost Legion, and a new paper came out, and they go, "Oh, like they just got lost. Their paperwork got lost." And I was like, "You're trying to tell me one of the two premier empires in the world history, who were the best at keeping track of records, just lost their second best legion." I was like, "That makes no sense." So I was like, "I didn't like that." So I didn't like that paper or that idea. So I'm like, I'm gonna put zombies with it, and that's what I did. And then I changed some things. So I've been working on that. But my friend, he's like, "You just take a lot of liberty with fantasy." Like he's like, "You just." But I like his I called it historical urban fantasy, you know, and but I was like,
Okay. Yeah.
I love those fantastical elements. Yeah, I'm a teacher. I deal with a lot of crap all day. You know, not myself, but like with my kids, you know, trying to, you know, help them and them through things or their trauma, which I love, but it's hard, you know. The last thing I want to go
Yeah.
home and do is watch Law and Order when some of the time in my career I've actually lived it, you know, where I've been, you know, having to give police statements or do this or that, you know, and I don't want to
Right.
do that in my personal life. You know, I want that escapism. And
Mhm.
for me, writing
Sure.
too, even though sometimes I write like you know, dark fantasy, sword and sorcery, things like that,
Yeah.
things that aren't always great, but you know, I still like to write the hero triumphs in some way, even if it's not everything that they tried, you know, but I think those fantastic elements they're fun for me to read and watch, and I think they're just more fun to write. So fantasy and sci-fi to me are just more fun.
Yeah, in terms of genre, I don't know if grimdark is considered a genre or not. At least not on Amazon. Maybe to readers. I mean, I know it is. Somebody says grimdark. I know it is.
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah.
hadn't considered Torchlight grimdark, but I'm thinking maybe like if I get some more feedback from people, I read it, and maybe I'll like start like saying that it's that because I had a couple of people I know read it recently, like the finished Amazon version of it.
Hmm.
And they're like paramedics and firefighters and critical care people or whatever who are also like readers. And one of them who's a critical care, I think she's a critical care nurse. I'm not, I guess I don't remember offhand, but anyway, I know she has a rough job, right? And except, I just know like, hey, like my mouth was hanging open at this scene. I can't believe you wrote something that vile. And I was like, thanks, because he meant as a compliment. So
Well, that to me just says that you did a really good job writing that scene.
yeah, thanks. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I did. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Um, yeah, well, it's just funny because you talked about Grimdark and we talk about it in here a lot. And I mean, I looked at your book, I looked at the cover, I was like, that's really cool. I looked at the blurb. I didn't care. I didn't look at the genre. I don't care, to be honest, as a reader. I know the book covers and the blurbs that I like. You know what I mean? And I feel like nowadays we're just getting too bogged down by genre. And I really love indie books, where we can just blur the lines where it doesn't matter, and it's like, did you have a good
Right.
time? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and I could tell
Absolutely.
reading your book, I'm gonna have a good time, regardless of what you
Yeah.
put in it. You
I'm
know what I
glad
mean?
to hear
Like,
it. Yeah.
yeah, like it's on my list actually for 2024. So I have a new TBR, so I'm trying to get caught up
Nice.
with the reviews next couple weeks. Just doing like 5, 10 minutes for each book and just popping around there. I've had a lot of people ask me, so I'm trying. I've been bogged down for a while, so I'm trying to get caught up. But yeah, but I'm like that's gonna be one I know I'm gonna enjoy. Now, level of enjoyment for different ones in 2024, I don't know, but that's gonna be one
Yeah.
that I know I'm gonna get something out of it. And
I
I
hope
don't know.
so.
I,
Yeah.
I just don't care what the genre is. I don't look. People always ask, you don't look. I'm like, no, I don't care. Like
Right.
I look at it. I know from your blurb and the cover by now, reading as many books I have in my life, that I'm gonna either like it or it's not my thing. Maybe when I get into it, I have one recently I want to finish just to see if it's different and to also figure out maybe as a writer what not to do. Because I'm
Mhm.
not entirely enjoying it. But
Right.
like I feel like there's always a lesson to be learned, but
For
I,
sure.
I won't review it that way. I'll review it as, something I learned, whatever. But yeah, it's just I feel like genre nowadays is like it almost is bogging us down rather than helping people. So, some people are like, this isn't grimdark, and you're like, well, it could be, or it could be sword and source, like you said, or dark fantasy, something like that. So I definitely think you have to find your genre. But I think that's why it's so hard today, particularly in indie, it's like you could say anything, any of us could pick, right? And
Right.
we might be wrong. So yeah, I think it ends up just gumming up the works more than anything. But it is important, but I think it's
Yeah.
hard. I
I
think that's why
mean,
it's so hard.
from an artistic standpoint, I mean, like, it seems like that if you write within a genre and stick to the confines of that genre, but you do it better than
True.
the next guy, that
Yep.
the system does reward you, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah.
there's also room for like art because like the way I went for it was it's like I didn't really look at it, but I consume a lot of media. I watch shows, I read books, I read mostly new authors, like not necessarily only indie, but like if I see something, this is their first book and it's a newer book, like I get that. I look on Tor's website for new debut authors and I read that, right? So I'm consuming new media and all of those people consumed older media. And so as I'm consuming new media, hopefully that comes out in my writing as like a new thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
If you sit here and you're like, I'm only going to read like Song of Fire and Ice and Lord of the Rings and Sword of Shannara, right? When you write, you're going to sound like you're writing in
Yep.
like 1985, right? And maybe that's cool. You could like, there's a market for that too, probably, right? Popped up on Amazon, be like for the fans of the Sword of Shannara. And it's like cool if that's like what you want to do, right? But I think like it's as somebody who's consuming new media, I would like to think that like some of the stuff that we're coming up with now, even if it doesn't fit the genre, people are going to look back and be like, that's the genre. That's like what we're doing now because we all
Yeah, yeah,
we all drank the same stuff, we all ate the same stuff, and now
yeah.
we're showing up and doing what we do. And so, looking the genre in a little bit of ways feels a little bit like looking to the past to me, rather than like consuming the new media and making the new thing, which is
Yeah,
a
yeah,
risk
yeah.
too, like because maybe your art's just not that good. It sucks. Like, oh well, but that's why we're all doing it because like
Yeah, yeah.
somebody's going to make something great, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, it's totally true. Yeah, I like the way that you put that. I think that's totally accurate statement. Um, yeah, no, I think that makes total sense. But I want to make sure that we got enough time here to, to talk about
Sure,
your
yeah, I
book.
know we're taking them off.
No, it's fine. We're just getting good stuff. So, but always want to make sure, I save that really good chunk of time, for people's own works. And I'm really excited to read your book. So I was coming along on social media. I think it was Facebook, and I think it was, I don't know if you had an ad or someone shared it. And I was just like, yep, that's my thing. So, I just want to make sure, we have enough time, to talk about it.
Sure, yeah, yeah.
I have questions. But what is your book Torchlight about, and how did you come up with this idea?
So because of that time in my life, like in my real life, I was just dealing with like a lot of struggles of like parenting and like my marriage splitting up and moving and, co-parenting and doing all these
Okay.
things, right? I had a lot of negative feelings and a lot of negative emotions. And I thought like,
Okay.
I'm going to, like anything I write now, I'm not going to be, able to. One of my unpublished novels, I had a character that was so good and so magnificent, so like wonderful a person. I started meditating every day just so I could try to get into her headspace a little bit, right? I didn't have to
Okay.
do that for Torchlight. Torchlight, I was like having to take like I would take like a 3, 4 mile walk once or twice a day just to like relax my anxious energy so that I could like sit down and write, get up in the morning and take a walk, go out at night, take a walk. And so I had these, a lot of these feelings. And I thought like I think I want to write about bad people who don't overcome these feelings. Like, what would it be like to be a tragic character? Because I felt like I was like overcoming. I have like a great relationship with my daughter. I have a great relationship with my ex. Like, I'm living in a good place. Like, my life is fine. I knew I would overcome it. But when you're in it, you're like, what would this tragic character, like people who like really like descend down the spiral, be like, right? And so I have this one character. I have like I have 5 point of view characters, but two of them carry the lion's share of the book. They're the two that the story's really about. And they're a couple of sorcerers who are in a romantic relationship, and they both are cursed. They're both cursed with these magic eating spirits that they carry around inside those orbs of light where they get their powers from. And because they eat magic, everyone, the people in their like little insular points of light society um, don't want them around. So one of them still uses his power because it's useful to him. And so he's kind of like exiled and has to live outside the city. And then the other
Mm.
one pretended that she exorcised the spirits. And so she keeps them like stuffed down and like sneaks magic for them or whatever. And then like tries to live her life inside. And so what ends up happening is the two of them go on this like little quest where they just had to take some of their magic to another monastery town for the king who lives there. And along the way, they discover like a new source of magic that's like so powerful it can solve all the problems for where they came from, right? But
Cool.
the guy who's been living with his spirits, he's like, hey, if she gets this supreme power back to her monastery, they're going to fix the walls, they're going to fortify the wards, they'll get rid of the demons. Like, she's not going to need me anymore. She's not going to need my spirits. She's not going to need me. I can't let her have it. And then on the flip side, she's like, hey, we need this. You have to promise me, don't tell anyone about this. And from there, they have their split and they go their separate ways. And then they get their own friends together and their own friends groups who support them in their various ways. And they lead competing expeditions up the mountain to
Oh,
try
that's
to get the
cool.
treasure and keep it from one another. And they're terrible people. So like their friends are in bad company, which they find out. You know?
That's awesome. I was gonna say, once you said like there were a couple words you said, I think you only got 5 words in. I was like, check, check, check. And that's why I think readers, just saying, like, I think sometimes when I see people with reviews, I don't look at reviews, but if I do, right? Sometimes people share, they're like, oh yeah, like I think it was Rhett C. Bruno shared Cold as Hell. And somebody was like, they swear all the blah 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 in here, and he made it advertisement.
Yeah.
And now it's really funny, it pops up all the time for me. I love it. But it's like 1 star review, and it's like, well, what did you think with a book that's called Cold as Hell? And being, like that genre. But it's just funny, because I'm just like check, check, check. So I feel like one thing is like readers really have to know themselves more. But that all sounds awesome. I gotta say, when I read your blurb, I was just like, this just sounds so cool. Um, yeah, I don't know. And with you explaining it there, it just like adds to it. Um, yeah, so for me, like I felt like your blurb was like dead on from your description. So I think that's something that people can also take. So I
Good.
would like to point that out for blurb. So definitely check out Ryan's blurb for Torchlight. You
Thanks.
got to make sure you check out the cover. It's one of my favorite ones I've seen the last couple of years. So definitely, definitely, those are two things I feel like you got, right away that most people take a while, to kind of go with. But I was curious, just going back to like your characters, and just like overall when it comes to your world building, I was just curious, like how did you go about your world building for this book? And like kind of like what did you focus on first? Did you focus on the magic, or did you have the idea with these two people first? I was just kind of curious at where you started, I guess.
So for the world building, now if you're familiar with the screenwriting guru John Truby, he has like some
Yeah,
books
yeah, yeah.
on how to do screenwriting. I really like his method on it. And so his method for coming up with characters, which I use for this, is you think about like the central action of the story, like what these
Mhm.
characters like have to do in order to like progress through the plot. And then you
Yeah,
come
yeah.
up with like the the kinds of people who are the least capable of doing it. And so then it builds in either a tragic arc or like a heroic arc where they either overcome like their inner problems or they don't. And so then once I knew that, Torchlight takes place entirely on this place called the Isle, and it's war torn, and like the remnants of the last war caused demons to plague a large part of the Isle. And there is like mentioned like these other societies who are outside of it, but the characters who are inside are just living in these fortified monastery towns. They don't have contact with the outside world. They don't talk about it. They're doing their thing inside there. And because my story it's not epic fantasy at all. It's about this relationship between two people and what they're dealing with. So I didn't need an expansive world. Like I kind
Yeah.
of thought through what the expansive world would be like in case like I wanted to go there at some point in the future. But for this story, it's two characters, it's their relationship. So playing in the sandbox in the confines of this one ruined isle was like all that they needed. Like honestly.
No, I think that makes total sense. I've actually talked to quite a few authors too recently who do, write epic fantasy, but they're doing the same thing where, they're really like zooming in. I guess yeah, let's talk about genre. I guess my fantasy book, one of them you could consider epic fantasy grimdark. I don't know, but I'm really just focusing on one city, and then later on,
Okay,
then
yeah.
they'll go out. So mention a few things here and there, but really like I'm really zoomed in. It doesn't matter really what's happening outside the city. Like it doesn't matter. Like we're really just talking about these characters, and they've lived in the city their whole lives and been there, haven't really been outside the city except for a few fields, further
I would
out. So
imagine
I
that.
definitely get that.
Yeah, I would sorry for talking over you there. I imagine that for your fantasy though, since you have like a city, it gives you a lot of inroads where you could talk about other
Oh, for
parts of the
sure.
world and people from different places and
Yep.
bring all of that together into like one little tinderbox.
Yeah, well, Rob J. Hayes, I think, just did such a good job. Wow, I can't believe I'm blanking. I was just looking at his books. Like the recent one was like Sins of the Mother. But anyways, but they have like the first one, right? Like they're trapped, like the main character like trapped in a prison, and then they kind of go from there. But I really
Oh
liked
yeah,
how um I like how he has represented certain of his, cities and places. Like they're almost like their own character. And I really
that's really
like
good
that
when people can do
aspect.
that.
Yeah, but I just, I don't know. I just like I talked to Emily Inkpen, and she just had a great way of talking about like how that was a great episode her and I had, but like just talking about like how she set up her world building and what she focused on, and then kind of went with the characters from there, sort of thing. It's just always to me interesting how different people start because you just I always call this a journeyman's podcast. People like myself and you, who are either just got something out there or just getting things out there, and I just always think that maybe if you're struggling, try something different. So I've talked about what I've done. You talk about what you've done. There's plenty of people on here, who have tried a method, but I think at some point, like you'll find what works for you, but you don't know if you don't know. That's why we hopefully, people watch and listen to podcasts like this. But yeah,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just
I
I
mean, I
think
know
it's
I'm going to,
interesting.
and I know I'm going to go back through and look for some of your recommendations from here. It's like, who did he say did that? Who's got the city book? Like, I'm
I'm
definitely
like,
going to
I
look a
think
few of those up.
it's really gonna bug me. But just so people know, so I reference like Michael Fletcher, Geo Jedhern, Rob J. Hayes, Dirk Ashton, Wizard Words and Words. Just go through their entire all their seasons, like just amazing. But they're ones with Will White and oh, not Brian McCullen. There was somebody else that was on there. Oh, now I'm gonna blank. I'll have to send it to you. But there was a few people on there that they just did such a good job. And just like, describing certain things. But, like world building, they just had some amazing world building aspects. Like Adrian Tchaikovsky when he was on there. Oh, Brian Staveley. Brian Staveley's was so cool. And I'm blanking on the book. Skull something, Skull Sworn, I think it was. But yeah, just amazing, strategies in terms of world building and characterization. So I highly recommend just their entire series. Like they had some really, really good ones. But then with Will White was just like amazing no matter which one it was. Brian Stabley was amazing. Adrian Tchaikovsky was like really, really good. Yeah, they got some really good ones on there. But yeah, I just always like to ask people
God
like
bless.
kind of there. But this actually leads me right back to your magic system. I was curious at how you went about creating your magic system, and yours just seems really unique. So, like, did you worry about like creating a magic system? Some people like me, I just
Yeah.
kind of put it in there. Like, I don't really talk about too much. So,
So, so I don't always write this way. For example, my work in progress has a very soft magic system with lots of things that can happen. Torchlight's not like that. When I started writing this, I was like really interested in some video games that had like more superhero type team fighting in it.
yeah, yeah,
And in my head, I was like, I think I want to try to write towards a set piece battle scene where I have these two teams coming at one another, and they've got like the tank and the striker and the flanker and the support character. And I was like,
yeah,
I
yeah,
think like I want to like play this out. And it didn't really happen in the book. Like it didn't once, like once the rubber met the road, I wasn't able to like get the set piece scene the way I wanted to. But it came off kind of, you'll see. But but I did aim for that. And so I have these different types of colored orbs that people carry, and each one has kind of like a set list of powers that they may or may not be able to get, and then other associated magical abilities. And so the character's magic in this is like very limited. Like they really work towards like, like the goals of survival in their society. So like somebody might be able to like enchant weapons or create barriers that spirits or magic spells can't go through, or hard shields that can stop physical things but don't work against magic very well or don't work against spirits. Um, there's like some magic that's used for making alchemy, some magic that's used for healing or for hiding. And so I just made it to where like it's a hard magic system in that the characters can't do things that they can't do. Like if your character's a healer, if this character's a healer and they can create like a barrier, there's never a day in Torchlight where they reach deep down and pull out a new power. Like
yeah.
they really stick to what it is that they're up to. And that so that allows you to kind of yes, I went so far with it that I play a lot of tabletop role playing games, and I actually wrote like a Dungeons and Dragons style role playing game where we've got, magic colored spheres, and they ranked from 1 to 5, and that's five,
Cool.
1 to 5, 10-sided dice, and that tells you like what the effective, like strength of that ability will be compared to another ability and modifiers. And I just wanted to like make it come off and make sense in that way.
Yeah, yeah,
Also because I was shooting for the moon too, I was
yeah.
like, Torchlight, it's going to be a video game. It's going to be a role-playing game. It's going to be a movie. So
I would
like,
totally play Torchlight, the role playing
yeah,
game, sure.
right, yeah.
But yeah, it just sounds awesome. And seeing the aesthetic and hearing you, like, I would definitely play that as a video game. That's definitely my kind of. I'm like trying to get Guardians of Ember right now to work. I got a few other things. Black Sky was one I think that looked really cool. But yeah, I would totally play that. I
Cool.
totally get gamifying though. I actually ran my last D&D game from my fantasy world and took some of the
Oh,
things,
cool.
and that's actually how I was testing things out. And then it actually ended up being a writing session for me where some of the things I changed based off of in the moment. I was like, oh, this is way better. And I wrote notes. So I
Oh, that's
modified
cool.
everything. And then I was modifying the manual, as I'm going, which I
That's
highly
awesome.
recommend
Yeah.
for people who like D&D. So I totally get that there. I have different
Yeah.
like mold like crystals that are actually organic beings that do different things. But yeah, it was really fun. But yeah, I always wanted to do my own game manual, so I'm right there with you. But I would definitely
Cool.
buy Torchlight, the 5e manual or guide or something like that. That sounds
Yeah,
awesome.
that'd be great. If anybody, A&D developers out there want to license the rights from me. Yeah.
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
kidding.
yeah, yeah. That'd be awesome. That actually leads me to my next question, because I got this from somebody who asked me when we were gaming, if you could pick one location, within your world to visit, which one would it be and why?
So the characters don't go there. Inside my world, there's a forest with a road that runs between the two remaining monasteries, where the one where the king lives and the one where his abbot lives. And that's like there's a conflict between those two monasteries. And the reason why the characters have this place is because within the confines of that area is where the alchemists are able to generate these orbs of magic to
Oh,
do their
cool.
spells. And that's why they won't leave, right? But if you cross over the road and then you go into the moorlands and then into the plains that are kind of on the other side of the isle, the demons aren't able to travel out there. They can only go within a certain distance of where the war happened. And so there's nomads that live out in this area. And they're, I really enjoy watching YouTube videos where people like in bed with like nomadic people from around the world, or when like those
Okay.
when nomads like do their own YouTube videos, you see them like, bringing their reindeer in, or
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
taking like hundreds of goats up the hill or horses, they're hunting wolves and trying to protect their sheep, and they're moving between camps throughout the year. And I wanted to catch, I wasn't able to like put the story in that area like I wanted to because the story just didn't go there for me, maybe in the future. But that part of the world is there because a couple of the characters are nomads from that area. So
yeah.
it's like, oh man, like taking care of the animals and living in these like close family campsites, and just having the good life out there. Like that's, it's like an aspirational place. I think we could all kind of see the attraction of like living in a yurt and moving around and
Yeah, yeah,
taking
yeah.
care of the people we love the most.
Well,
Yeah.
it's funny that you mentioned that because Sienna, my first episode, this season for season three, she actually did that. Like she travels a lot, so she actually went and did that. So it's funny that you mentioned that. She's like,
That's cool.
yeah, I lived in Europe for a while, and she went and lived in Mongolia for a little bit and yeah, like
Neat.
did a whole bunch of stuff. Like yeah, so her and I talked a lot about that. But yeah, it's always interesting to me to ask people that question because people always have one particular spot. It's funny that you mentioned that. I have in one of my books I have this guy who was like a scholar. He's kind of like my fantasy version of Indiana Jones, if you will. Um but yeah, he goes and actually at one part of book one, he goes and has to get help from a bunch of like essentially like Bedouin tribes. And I just got so involved in the research trying to bring
Cool.
their amazing culture, to life that I had to take a break for a little while. Then so I have to go back eventually. But that was like definitely hanging with them would be really cool. I always think of oh, Jed from Wizard of Earthsea with Ursula, and where he like goes at one point with like his apprentice, whatever, in book three, and book two or book three, I forget, but like he gets like with the people that live on the ocean with the whales essentially, and that's just like what they do. And I was always thinking like, God, that would just be like really, really cool. So I always
Yeah, yeah.
thought that would be a really neat question for people. So yeah. I feel like people
That's
always
cool.
have
Yeah.
that spot, that they,
Yeah, for sure. You're gonna write
like
something you love into it.
exactly, yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah.
totally. It's just always more fun that way. If not, what are you doing with your time? All
Right.
right.
Yeah.
So this is always my favorite. A fellow author gave this to me a while back. So he goes, I just want to see what people would say. If you had to fight one person or monster from your book, who would you be most worried to fight and why?
Oh. So the monsters in my book I couldn't fight. Like there's like a dragon, there's demons, there's little fog clouds of mist that like just dissolve your flesh and pull it up into the air and make it
Cool.
disappear. Like you can't, it's stuff that you can't fight without magic, right? So narrowing it down to like the main characters like in the book. There's this one character named Chitris who has a number of point of view chapters throughout the book, and he's the shield bearer. He's like the head of the monks that can like produce force fields that can block physical things, and they train martial arts and they train these shields or whatever. And he's
Oh,
just
that's
like
cool.
he's just like this like big hulking lion of a dude that has like a shield that like no one can mess with. And then even though he has that, he still wears the bronze armor, the bronze greaves, the helm, the breastplate. Then he's got like the javelins, the sword, the spear, and he just uses his shield to wear people down. And then when people get past that, he uses martial arts. He's kicking people in the leg with his bronze greave. And stuff like that. And so it's
Sounds
like
like my
it's
kind of guy.
hopeless that a guy like that. It's hopeless against every step of the way. You come with magic, he comes with shields. You come with a sword, he comes with like other kinds of shields, or with like just his martial arts. Like so that guy, he's he's a tough one. He's a tough one.
Oh, that sounds awesome. It
Yeah.
kind of makes me think of a guy I was writing where it was like he's like a monk, and um I always picture like Forrest Griffin, the UFC fighter from back in the day,
Yeah, yeah,
being
yeah.
like this monk, but with like my character. But it's the same thing. Like I'm always like people are
Right.
asking me, I was like, he does some cool stuff. Doesn't have the greatest power, but like Brandon Sanderson, I just love his his take on it, is like Aloe of Law, like I love that book, but I love his take on it, is he doesn't make them super powerful, anybody, but he just gives them one power that they can really use in multiple ways. And it's that creativity that makes them powerful, right? Not their power. So when you're saying that, that's what that
Yeah.
makes me think of, that type of thing instantly. I feel like there's just so many cool things you could do with shields, especially as a martial artist, you
Right.
can block, do different things, and that just sounds like
Yeah,
a
yeah.
fun character to write. So
Yeah.
that if I wasn't sold already, Ryan, you actually just sold me because I'm huge into martial arts. So that definitely sounds like my kind of guy. So I'm
All
pretty
right, right.
excited
Cool,
for
cool.
that character. So that's super cool. I just definitely want to make sure, that we had some time also, to talk about, some future projects and things. But I just want to talk real quick, because I think sometimes we, forget. So I always kind of add this in lately for season three. I'm curious at like what you consider your greatest success so far as an author would be.
Yeah. The writer Orson Scott Card. I'm not co-signing Orson Scott Card's problematic things when I bring him up, but he has a writing book I read a long time ago, like a guide. And
Yeah,
he really believed at that time that like success is very luck driven. He said like you can't control the luck aspect of this. Like you can buy a lottery ticket by writing something good, but you can't control if your numbers get pulled. So his definition of success was, did you write a book that at least one person, not friend or family, liked? And if you can do that, like you've done the thing, like that artistically, that's it. And so like, like, yeah, like I'll take it. I take my win. Like I'm gonna like, I've had some people tell me they liked it. So, cool.
yeah,
Like, yeah. So I'm taking that. Like that's, it's enough for me. So yeah, I hope lots of people read Torchlight. I hope it
yeah,
gets popular. I hope like, people I haven't like had like strangers put reviews up for Torchlight. Like I've specifically told people in my writing group, like, hey, or friends or family, I'm like, hey, no sock puppets. Like I've already known you can't put the review up. Like people that I know don't like know as well might put one up, right? But like, like the people that like I could go in there and be like, yo, 5-star me with your sock puppet. Like I'm not doing that. So
yeah,
I'm really hoping that when the review numbers pop up, I'll be able to be like, hey, 3 people that gave me 4 stars, those are real 4 stars.
yeah, yeah.
Like
No,
that's what
no,
I'm
no,
hoping for. But
yeah,
yeah, like some people said they liked it. So like that's, like I'm just playing it by ear. Like I hope more people read it, but like I'm pretty happy people like Torchlight. I did publish a short story once. I did get paid $10 for a short story once. So I guess technically that's my greatest success. So
yeah. Well,
yeah,
I just want to bring it up because I think that
yeah,
I had some people ask me privately, right? They're like, oh, I'm really worried about this. I'm worried about that. And I'm like, what are you worried about? They're like, well, I'm worried that no one's gonna like my book. I was like, there are literally how many billions of people on this planet? I'm like,
right.
there's gonna be somebody that likes your book. If you go back, my brother always makes fun of me, the last 20 years. He's like, I can't believe you like that movie. I'm like, I
Yeah,
liked it, Pathfinder,
right.
the Native American,
Yeah, yeah,
take a Viking orphan in, then he has to defend them later. I love that movie. My brother hated it,
yeah,
Stealth with
for sure.
Jamie Foxx and Jessica Biel and whatever that other guy's name is from Fast and the Furious, the villain 2 or whatever, the second movie. Like he was in it. That movie was really interesting. So,
Right. Yeah,
I
and
think
yeah,
it's the same thing with books.
and we're artists. I mean, like it's great the idea of being famous or whatever, but I mean, like think of all the art you love that's not famous art. You go to a bar and there's a band playing, and the band has been playing together for 20 years, and they're not famous, but they're awesome, right? Your writing group is like your band. You
Yep.
go to an art festival where people are outside with their paintings, and you see them, and you're like, you really admire it. Like, they're not breaking the bank with what they're making, selling paintings at like art shows, right? But like you still admire it. You still be like, hey, that's good art. Like appreciate this art that we saw. And so, I feel like that's what we're aiming for. And then like the commercial aspect that pops up, like cool. I mean, everyone loves money. I love money and fame, right? Like, like those are great things, cool. But like first and foremost, like, we're doing art, So you got to think of the times like where you saw art that wasn't famous that you still admired, and you can be like, can I be like that? Like that's like step one, And if that's like enough for you, if you can like hold on to that, then you can just keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I totally agree. I always just think like I want. I don't know. I guess now I'm like my friend. He goes, you just like he goes, I don't think you care if anybody reads it. He goes, you just want to keep writing to get the story out there, just to. I said, I at this point I write for my son. I would say partly is like I want
Yeah,
him to, even if he doesn't like urban fantasy that I write or fantasy or sci-fi, I want him growing up in a world where his dad you know, from age like 13 wanted to write their own book and then wrote multiple, If that's the only
yeah,
thing
yeah,
I've done, and then the only other thing I've done is made my words immortal by writing them,
yeah.
and
Oh
my
yeah.
grandkids or somebody can go back, and be like, oh, my grandpa did that. My great uncle had published a couple of books, and it's cool, he passed away years and years ago, but it's cool to get to go and check those out, and say like these are his words, So those are some of those intrinsical things, that, I like I just want, So the other stuff, cool. Sounds good.
Right.
I too would like,
100%, dude. Yeah.
yeah, people to read and, stuff like that. But at the same time, like I feel like there's just other things, that to me are more important, and as long as I was telling my wife was like, as long as I can break even and just keep writing another book and getting it out there. That's why people ask me, what if you don't? I'm like, I'll just save up and I'll just write something else. I'm doing Kindle Bella right now because I don't really have
Yeah.
the money. And then I doing my novellas because I don't really have the money for, a lot of editing and covers. So I'm hoping to either break even or at least get better or whatever. So I think,
Yeah.
different people's successes and, what you value really should come back to that. So I think different people, are looking at Brandon, and like, oh, all this, but it's, at the same time, he wrote 13 books before he actually finished one, like really finished one. So, that was success, hard earned, I would say. I think some people think
Right.
he was lucky or whatever, but I don't think that. I think that, I would disagree with Orson there. I think that he just kept working at his craft, and he'll say that all the time, right, with his lectures and stuff, like work on your craft, get better, and you also have to think
Right.
about what you want. I love the BYU lecture where he talked about that, right? Like some people are okay, like his friend is okay writing a book every 3 or 4 years. His, one of his female author friends from his writing group, and he's like, she's phenomenal. Could she make it full time if she wanted to, be traditionally published? Probably, but that's not what she's about. She's about the craft and the art, like you said. So, she's getting
Mhm.
out of it exactly, what she puts in and wants. So I just think, like we should each measure our successes, and I think a lot of people too, I talk to a lot of my kids, I think a lot of times we forget those little successes. You wrote a book and then published it. You know what I mean? And like that is just like most people don't do that. Our community is really
Hey,
small.
I'm sorry.
You know?
I am so sorry. Somebody's pounding on my door.
Oh, go right ahead.
Um, can we pause the conversation? I can see
Yeah,
what's going
yeah,
on.
yeah, 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 yeah.
All
Let
right,
me do that
thank
right
you.
now, actually.
Okay.
2, 1. So we'll go with that last question. Do you have any news updates, current projects, anything like that that you can share with us?
Yeah, I'm a good chunk of the way along with the new novel, like probably three-quarters of the way done with it. I've already got cover art being worked on for it by the same cover artist, so that's going to be fire. The working title for it's called Gale Birds, and this is a story that goes back to back when I was doing emergency medicine back in the day. And so in this story, it's going to have two characters, and one of them is this powerful sorceress whose father is a who is a vampire, and she's running the kingdom for him while he's asleep, and then protecting the people from him when he gets up at night. And so she's running back and forth, doing all of these things to like basically like protect the kingdom, like from the vampire king.
Yeah.
And so while she's doing that, she suffers this mortal wound, and she's got the sword just stuck in her chest, that nobody can draw, and it's taking her magic away or whatever. And so her father, being a vampire, knows that he could save her by cursing her with vampirism. There's these other sorcerers who are necromancers who have other ways that are horrible for making her immortal. Other people that could turn her to stone or put her soul in another person's body, like all of these things that she doesn't want. And so the book is like really, it's about her right to die. And so then the other character is this healer who, for a number of reasons to like protect protect people he knows from her father, to save her life for all of these different reasons, wants to get this magical sword pulled out of her. But that's easier said than done. And all along the way, all of these people are trying to save her by cursing her with immortality that she doesn't want. And so the two of them are trying to figure out how they're going to save her, and then failing that, how they're going to let her die. And so it's you know, when you're doing emergency medicine, you run into that a lot where you have people like sometimes that want to die and there's like a disagreement about that. And that's something that comes up in people's lives a lot. And it's very traumatic. And so some of those experiences always stuck with me. So
Yeah, yeah,
seeing if I can, make this, like kind of find some of that energy in her character. And it's turning
yeah,
out really good. It's actually like I like it a lot. Like the book is like actually it's like turning out great. So I'm hoping it's going to get done quickly.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, it sounds really interesting. So I
Yeah.
have to check that out when you're done. That sounds
Yeah.
really
Plus
cool.
there's like
And that's
tons of
again,
magical
like,
combat. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, that's cool. But again, it goes back to genre. I think there's just so many fun things you can do like that. Like bring the real. I want to do like a firefighter thing. Or like a fire inspector.
Yeah.
Have it be like an elementalist, but like a Harry Dresden sort of thing, and he
Oh, that's
inspects,
cool. Yeah.
and then tracks down arsonists or different sorcerers or
That's
creatures.
fire. That's so good. That's
Yeah,
so
so
good. You should just
I
write
think it'd
that.
be
That's
cool.
so good.
Yeah, I have like a
Yeah.
guard, like a city guard, right? I was like, instead of you being the hero, what about me being the guard and then having to do different things. And then you kind of see as the city guard moves up, but you see all these, other things that happen, and he has to deal with the non-superhero-esque things if you want, or magical things. But, the hero gets to do all the fun. And you actually see the hero
Right.
doing the fun stuff. So I always think of stuff like that. But it's like fantasy's cool, right? Because I know I love sci-fi, don't get me wrong, but I love fantasy because I feel like you can take the real world things like you just mentioned, and there's just so many different, it just changes the entire story, and it just makes it really
Right.
interesting.
Right.
That sounds really awesome. So
Yeah.
definitely keep me updated. Oh, I totally forgot. Please, do you have a newsletter? Or I just was curious. I meant to ask earlier.
We do have if you go to my website, ryan-lance.com, you can sign up for my newsletter on there. And as it says, I promise no more than 4 per year plus new product releases. So I'm not going to spam you every week. Please come help me out.
I think it's funny when people always say, I'm like, I don't care. I only sign up for newsletters where I want the information at this point. So
Yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
that's fine. But no, that sounds awesome. And I just want to remind people in our audience that if you are new and you just happen to find us somewhere or somehow, you could find all of Ryan's socials, his websites, Torchlight book. Everything's going to be in the description, anywhere where you're watching this video or listening to this audio. And that goes for all of our authors as well. You can also find this episode and information for Ryan if you're actually watching on our website, on our WordPress. You can actually go right there and click on the YouTube, and then it'll actually take you right to the description where you can actually do the same thing. But just want to make sure people are going to our authors and creator sites, and we also want to make sure, just as a reminder, please make sure you're reviewing those products. Ryan has mentioned that a couple times in this video. So I always review products, no matter what they are in terms of creators, if it's a comic book, audio, Audible. It helps out people like Amy Hutchinson, Aaron Moon that'll be on. She's another audio narrator. It helps out the editors, everybody, cover artists, like Ryan mentioned. So I just want to make sure that we're still, kind of going with that theme from the last couple of seasons. Ryan, thank you so much for coming on. You got me really thinking
You.
about a couple of different things now, which is always really fun for me before I go into my writing session. I love doing podcasts beforehand because it just helps me, get the juices flowing and stuff, and the wheels turning. But if there's anything I can do, I'll send you the dates later today on when this will air. If there's anything else I can do before or after, just message me, let me know.
Thank you
You
so
got the
much.
group and everything, but yeah, anything I can do at all to help you out, just let me know and I'll help you as best I can.
Yeah. Hey, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, yeah,
Great
anytime,
stuff. Great podcast. I'm enjoying listening to your podcast. I started going back through them and it's really interesting.
Oh, I've been really lucky. I've had some very interesting talks and people had really good answers. So it's been a fun
Yeah,
journey so far. So gonna try and keep it going as long as possible. So cool.
100%. Yeah,
Well,
great.
thank you so much. Like I said, if you need anything, just message me on Facebook or anything like that, or email me and I'll help you out as best I can. Other than that, though, I hope you have a great rest of the day and I will talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Thank you.
See you later.